Hello, and thanks for joining me. My name is Dr. Jack. In this video, we'll be discussing the differences between less processed as well as highly processed foods and why this is so important to our health and wellness. We will cover topics as to how highly processed foods in particular can lead to things like insulin resistance and ultimately to weight gain and obesity, as well as lead to chronic inflammation, which we have talked about in previous videos, and how all this cascades into various chronic illnesses long term. And then we will end the video by looking at ways to reduce this horrible food group. So join me and let's start learning about this important topic on how to appropriately start nourishing your body. So again, welcome to this video. And for those of you that are unaware, and this might be the first video you're watching in this playlist, this is the third video in a playlist that I'm creating to hopefully help people lose weight permanently. And I do suggest watching these videos in order as they kind of build on one topic on top of the other, and it just makes a little bit more sense. So with that out of the way, let's get started. So to begin with, what is a processed or refined food? A refined food is simply food that does not have all of its original content. A processed food means that some process was applied to it. In other words, a processed or refined food cannot be picked out of a garden and eaten. And these are things like oil and sugar and white flour. And this also includes foods from all that these products are made from. Things like white bread, crackers, instant anything is processed. So that goes for instant oatmeal, noodles, soup, instant frozen meals, as well as various processed meats such as nuggets, ham, sausages, and we can't forget baked goods as well, such as cakes and pastries and cookies, and also lumped in here are potato chips and pretzels, cereal, ice cream, candy, and sodas, as well as other sweetened drinks. And the list goes on and on and on. The USDA defines a processed food as one that has undergone any changes to its natural state. And this includes things such as chopping, heating, cooking, canning, freezing, and drying the product. In today's modern world, it is hard to avoid processed foods entirely due to the societal needs and constraints of having to get food to all parts of the world. However, when we do eat, we should focus on minimally processed foods, meaning foods that just had some cleaning or some freezing, fermentation, vacuum packaging, or just some pasteurization. It's important to keep in mind that not all processed foods are bad for you. For example, we can add fortified vitamins and minerals, and it has led to better public health. And examples of this include milk fortified with vitamin D to prevent things like rickets, as well as wheat flour fortified with folic acid to prevent birth defects, and iodine added to salt to prevent things like goiters. And you also have things like canned tuna or tomatoes that are processed to lock in freshness and ingredients. It's also important to keep in mind that some processes like cooking, drying, pasteurization can destroy harmful bacteria. That's a good thing, but at the same time, it can unfortunately destroy certain vitamins and minerals as well. And there are some circumstances where things are added chemically rather than mechanically. And in those circumstances, you really want to focus on products that add as little as possible. There are some cheeses as well as fresh made bread, sardines or canned fish, canned fruits and veggies are just some of the examples. And good processed foods are things made from things like 100% whole grain or rolled or steel cut oats, dried or frozen fruits and veggies. In these instances, the food still holds its original nutrients. And all of this is in comparison to the truly worst type of food that you can eat, and that is highly processed foods. Highly processed, ultra processed, chemically processed foods all mean essentially the same thing. They add many different ingredients to the mix. The term artificial flavor is deemed a proprietary recipe. Therefore, manufacturers do not need to disclose what is in their secret quote-unquote artificial flavor. Things like artificial colors, flavors, preservatives, and things added to change the texture of food are all included in highly processed products. Because of all this, they are oftentimes labeled as cosmetic foods. They are not made to nourish your body. Instead, they are made to look, feel, taste, and smell good with the main purpose of increasing our craving for that product. They are made to cater to your taste buds at a very cheap price device and target the reward center of your brain specifically to crave these types of food. They have lots of added sugar, artificial ingredients, refined carbohydrates, as well as trans fats, and they are typically stripped of very important things such as fiber, vitamins, and minerals. If you look at the studies, more than half of the calories in the average American diet comes from ultra-processed foods. They account for 25 to 60% of a person's daily energy intake of food throughout most of the world. And ever since this trend has increased, so has the developed world's obesity issue. One large study looking at about 100,000 adults found that eating 10% more of ultra-processed foods results in 12% increased risk of heart disease and stroke. And in another study of 20,000 adults, they found that if you eat 4 servings of processed foods a day, then it showed an increased risk for all causes of mortality. In fact, each additional serving increased all causes of mortality risk by 18%. Most of these highly processed foods come in the form of refined carbohydrates. The problem with these highly refined carbohydrates is that they are very quickly absorbed into our body due to lack of things like fiber that's in them. And so with that very quick absorption, you get very high spikes in glucose and subsequently insulin as well. And when insulin is constantly present, that's how over time you start to develop insulin resistance, leading to type 2 diabetes, obesity, and all these things that I covered in the previous videos. And with these peaks and troughs within your body of this glucose level, what ends up happening is that you get hungry faster and you end up consuming more of this unhealthy product, as well as you end up craving the food product much more on top of that. Most highly processed foods are designed to be eaten very quickly because the faster you eat, the more you will eat, and therefore the more you will spend on the company's product. They melt in your mouth almost with minimal chewing. This is because much of the fiber is gone within the processed foods as discussed, so you eat more bad calories, use less energy in digesting it as it absorbs into your body very quickly. They also have cheap fats in the form of refined seeds or vegetable oils. They are cheap and have a very long shelf life. Artificial trans fats are created, and trans fats are well known to cause inflammation as well as raising bad cholesterol and lowers the good cholesterol in your body. In many instances, manufacturers actually try to add back some of these vitamins and minerals and things of that nature. However, no matter how much you add them back, it is not the same as the original product. If you eat fruits, veggies, and whole grains, there are many other healthy phytonutrients or plant nutrients within them. Things like flavonoids and tannins, carotenoids, as well as terpenes, just to name a few of them. They are antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, anti-carcinogenic, and they have an entourage effect. And for those of you that follow my channel, you know that I talk about CBD quite a bit and the entourage effect. It simply means that the various phytonutrients or plant nutrients that they each amplify each other's effects synergistically, meaning that they are more powerful together as opposed to taking them individually. These processed foods tend to have added sugar, and oftentimes it is in the dreaded form of high fructose corn syrup. Let's take the time to talk about high fructose corn syrup a bit because it adds absolutely no nutritional value but adds a ton of calories. It is considered an empty calorie for that reason. So the more you eat, the less room you have for nutrient-dense foods, and it can lead to compulsory eating. Many people that believe that high fructose corn syrup is actually a key reason as to why the obesity epidemic occurs. High fructose corn syrup has been linked to things like diabetes, obesity, and heart disease. Now, it is important to know that there are natural fructose in nature in the form of fruits and vegetables. And that is okay because it's very hard to consume very large amounts of that. However, when you look at high fructose corn syrup, it's in absolutely everything and is very, very concentrated. It's in things like sodas, fruit juices, yogurts, ketchups, jams, desserts, breads, and I could go on and on. It includes things like energy bars, salad dressing, cereals, just to name a few. So let's say that you eat a handful of almonds. Thanks to the fiber in it, it will slowly break down in your body and slowly raises your blood glucose. During processing, the fiber is removed. Fiber slows the absorption of carbohydrates and makes you feel more full for a prolonged period of time. It's considered a prebiotic or feeds your gut biome. By the way, feel free to check out my entire series on the gut biome as to why that's so important for your health and how that also contributes to various diseases as well as obesity and inflammation and things of that nature. Because the gut biome or the good biome, good bacteria inside of your gut is so unbelievably important. So you have foods that are high in fiber like fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, nuts, and seeds, and they get broken down in an ideal way within our bodies. However, table sugar, that is 50% fructose, and high fructose corn syrup are metabolized very differently within our body, and it causes issues because the fructose needs to be converted into glucose, glycogen, or fat by the liver before it can ever be used as a fuel. And glycogen is just stored glucose. Hence, all of this contributes to things like fatty liver disease. Fructose also does not stimulate satiety in your brain as much, meaning you do not feel full when consuming it. High fructose corn syrup blocks leptin sensitivity in your brain. Leptin is a hormone that is made in fat cells and communicates with your brain to help manage cravings and hunger. Leptin helps regulate your metabolic rate as well. And the results of all this means that on average, you will consume about 500 bad calories per day than what is suggested. High fructose corn syrup is well known to cause things like insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome. It has been linked to diseases such as mentioned, fatty liver disease, chronic inflammation, obesity, hypertension, reduced life expectancy, atherosclerosis, leaky gut syndrome that I talked about in the gut biome series, type 2 diabetes, as well as cancer. And cancer cells actually love fructose. They feed off of it and multiply. And it also comes in many different names. So this is just a list of some of the names, things like natural corn syrup, maize syrup, fructose syrup, pretty much anything with the word fructose involved in it or syrup involved in it, you can almost be guaranteed that fructose is somehow involved. And manufacturers think that if they add the word fruit in front of fructose, somehow that might make it better. And in Canada, it's called different names. It's called glucose fructose. And in Europe, it's called isoglucose or glucose fructose syrup or fructose glucose syrup. And the global market for high fructose corn syrup is big money. There was $5.9 billion in the high fructose corn syrup industry within 2019. So with this better understanding, what can you do to start reducing the amount of highly processed foods that you consume? Well, you can start by checking the food label. The longer the list of ingredients, the more processed it is. It's suggested that you shop outside the aisles of the grocery store, so shop on the periphery. Stores are strategically laid out. It is not a coincidence that the sodas and cookies and chips are all within one aisle. Stick to produce and dairy aisles as your main shopping experience. Focus on less processed meats like seafood, chicken breasts, and things of that nature. Avoid heavily processed meats like sausage, cured meats like bacon, and cook more meals at home. And for those of you that don't like to cook, well, consider cooking very large batches and then freezing it to eat at a later date. And if all else fails, here's what I tell my patients. I tell them just to remember the great-great-grandmother rule. The great-great-grandmother rule is that if your great-great-grandmother doesn't identify it as food, then don't eat it. If it comes in a box also, do not eat it because it is likely highly processed. Ultimately, what we need to do is change our relationship with food and how we view food. The way we eat is making too many people sick and overweight. This leads to a shortened life expectancy and lots of chronic pain issues in the process that I see in the clinic every day. We should view food as what nourishes our body and not as only what tastes good, because the food industry has our brain chemistry figured out. They know what the human brain craves, and they know how to pull all the right strings to make us crave their product. You can start slowly if you need, but the important thing is that you start somewhere and start to replace those highly processed foods with more whole foods. And the most important thing is that it always starts with knowledge and education. So be sure to educate yourself about all of this. And as you're educating yourself, educate those around you, because you can make such a huge impact in your loved ones' lives by making them aware of what is good to eat and what is bad to eat and the long-term implications and how all of this might play into some chronic diseases that they may or may not be suffering from already. Besides, that's the whole point of this channel, right? Is to share the knowledge. So with that, I'll close this video. I hope you found it helpful, and as always, if you did, hitting the thumbs up, the like button is really helpful, as well as sharing this video with others. If you thought this video was helpful, or if you just want to say hi, I read all of your comments. If you have video suggestions, let me know as well. So till next time, take care, be nice, bye-bye, Pura Vida. Each kind of amplify or synergistically that they each